The honourable member for Dartmouth Cole Harbour will have approximately 6 minutes of questions and comments when we resume debate on this issue. Déclaration de députés. The honourable member for Brandon Souris.
Mr. Speaker, even though spring is in full bloom, it gives me great pleasure to rise in the House to congratulate Canada's 2015 senior women's curling team on their recent World Championship. Last month, Lois Fowler's rink of 3rd Maureen Bonner, 2nd Kathy Gauthier, lead Alison Stewart, and coach Brian Fowler proudly adorned the Maple Leaf while winning the Women's World Curling Championship in Sochi, Russia. Not only was this their first World Championship, but it was the first World Curling title ever won by a Brandon-based team. With this World Championship, they have once again made Westman proud, and as I've always said, Manitoba is the heartbeat of curling in Canada. Lois, Maureen, Kathy, Allison, and Coach Brian have distinguished curling records and have inspired countless others to take up the sport. Not only are they great curlers, they are class acts who are very much respected in the curling community. On behalf of the members of the House of Commons, I extend hearty congratulations and all the best in their future endeavours.
The honourable member for Longueuil, Pierre Boucher. Mr. Speaker, a lot of people in Longueuil feel that they've paid enough in tax and they get less in service, and billions of dollars are sheltered in tax havens instead of being put into our hospitals and schools. They rightly ask, why is it always us who have to pay? Why is it honest taxpayers who pay for reduced services so that multinational corporations can shelter their money in tax havens and refuse to abide by our tax laws? Billions of dollars have left Canada to be invested in Barbados and Luxembourg and so on. Ottawa should work with our international partners to make sure that honest taxpayers are not subsidizing those who cheat the system. The government has to crack down on tax shelters, and they can count on the NDP to do that when we form government.
Lampton.
Mr. Speaker, I'm honoured to speak in support of Mental Health Week and to urge parliamentarians to continue our efforts of raising awareness towards fighting the stigma attached to mental illness. According to the Canadian Mental Health Association, each year 1 in 5 Canadians experiences a personal mental health issue, with an estimated cost to our national economy of over $150 million. Mental health issues can indirectly impact all of us at some time through a loved one, friend, or colleague. During Mental Health Week, Canadians must seek to confront the stigma still associated with the discussion of personal mental health matters so that we can help those who truly need it. We must break this cycle and help Canadians understand that help is out there, that even the darkest clouds can have silver linings. I would ask MPs to share resources from CMHA with their constituents by visiting mentalhealthweek.ca and spreading the message across social media. Thank you.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Council.
Mr. Speaker, last week I had the great pleasure to attend the 50th anniversary of the Glace Bay Citizens Service League. In November 1965, under the guidance of Hilda Wright, on the initiative of the United Church, a pilot project was undertaken in ecumenical social service, bringing together churches, service groups, and social agencies with the goal of improving the economic conditions and quality of life for the people of Glace Bay. The League provides programs like the Clothing Depot, Furniture Exchange, backpack programs, Meals on Wheels, nursery schools, babysitting courses, and seniors programs, all delivered by an army of over 200 incredibly dedicated volunteers. Wow. The League presented 50-year service pins to Marge Petit, Effie McCauley, Jeanette Stearns, and the League's first and longest-serving board chair, Shirley Chernin. The talented and dedicated staff, led by Executive Director Susan Plath and Board of Directors Chair Gatha McMullen, are the first to point out to the hundreds of volunteers who have given so much to the benefit of so many as the reason for the League's 50 years of success. I ask the House to join me in congratulating the Glace Bay Citizen Service League on their 50th anniversary of giving.
The honourable member for Calgary Centre.
today I want to bring some good news to Calgary parents and tell them what our government is doing for their youth this summer. Now, we know that parents, that you're working really hard to put your kids through school. And we also know that you want us to address one of your major concerns, which is, will my son or daughter have a job once they graduate? Well, we're helping with that through our Canada Summer Jobs program. It's in fact helping the employers create 200 jobs in my riding of Calgary Centre alone and 35,000 summer jobs for students across the country. Starting right away, they'll be gaining career experience and also making some money this summer. Now, $950,000 of your tax dollars are going to support student jobs in my riding of Calgary Centre alone. Some of the places you'll see students working are at the YMCA's Kids in Motion program, at WordFest, celebrating the joy of reading and writing, Terex Environmental, providing environmental services to business, Petroleum Technology Alliance, Calgary Stampede, and Mustard Seed. Cheer them on when you see them.
The Honourable Member for Vancouver Kingsway.
Mr. Speaker, 3 municipalities in the Lower Mainland of British Columbia have proclaimed May 3 to 9 Neighbourhood House Week. It gives me great pleasure to draw to the attention of this House the multifaceted contributions of these outstanding organizations to our communities and our country. The rich history of the Neighbourhood House movement in Metro Vancouver dates from 1894, when the precursor of the Alexandra Neighbourhood House, a children's orphanage, opened on Pine Street. Today, we have 14 neighbourhood houses that serve more than 100,000 people every year. These treasures provide a broad array of services that bring every part of our community together. They feed the homeless, teach our youth, and nurture our citizens, from social, cultural, and recreational programs to helping individuals, families, and new Canadians develop and connect. Neighbourhood houses are welcoming homes for everyone in our community. In Vancouver Kingsway, we are blessed with 3 outstanding neighbourhood houses: Cedar Cottage, Collingwood, and Little Mountain. On behalf of the Parliament of Canada, we thank them and all neighbourhood houses for their contributions to our nation.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, 70 years ago tomorrow, the guns fell silent in Europe after 5 years and 8 months of destruction and the death of tens of millions of people. Victory in Europe Day commemorates the courage, service, and sacrifice of millions of people committed to upholding freedom and democracy on behalf of those who couldn't do it themselves. Among them are 1 million Canadians in uniform. Many of them are related to people in this House and gallery today. The history of Canada is replete with examples of our country standing up when it counts. We can never forget that, and we should always be proud of that. Mr. Speaker, today the Veterans Affairs Committee and I, with the able assistance of my grandson Tyler and granddaughter Rhea, laid a wreath at the National War Memorial to pay homage to the 47,000 Canadians who made the ultimate sacrifice, the tens of thousands wounded or taken prisoner, and the hundreds of thousands who returned home unscathed, at least physically, after having done their duty. Tyler and Rhea don't understand the significance of VE Day and other such days yet, but they will. And, Mr. Speaker, I invite all honourable members of this House and all Canadians to pause tomorrow and any day to say thank you to all those who guarantee our freedom and the freedom of all Canadians like Tyler and Rhea. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Chicoutimi-Le-Fjord. This week is 64th Annual National Mental Health Week. Just as we all have physical health, each and every Canadian has mental health. And over the years, it's either good or not so good. Life isn't easy and there are lots of obstacles in our path. No problem is insignificant because everyone has emotions in reaction to events. These problems put a strain on a person, and that's not conducive to making the best decisions. That's why we need to talk about our pain to our loved ones or an anonymous helpline. People do want to share their pain, to put it into words. They want others to acknowledge it. They want to get it off their chest. For that, you have to give them a chance to express themselves, not necessarily give them advice, but listen. We should trust people to be able to make their own decisions. All we need to do is be there for them, to be quiet and listen, because just talking about it cuts anxiety levels in half. Talking about it releases the emotions and enables people to be more mentally balanced. So let's all take the time to listen to one another. I'd like to thank Tel-Ed Saguenay-Lac-Saint-Jean for being there.
Mr. Speaker, the leader of the Liberal Party plans to replace our government's family tax cut with a family tax hike. He admits he will take away the tax-free saving accounts expansion and take away income splitting for families. Mr. Speaker, Liberals are ideologically opposed to lower taxes, and if given a chance, will raise taxes on middle-class seniors, middle-class workers, and middle-class small businesses. Our Conservative government has delivered low taxes and benefits directly to families. The Liberals want high taxes and huge debt. Canadians know that it's our Conservative government that they can count on to lower taxes for middle class. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take this opportunity on behalf of the people of the Northwest Territories to congratulate Rachel Notley and the NDP on their election victory. As a strong, stable majority government for Alberta. Mr. Speaker, the people of the Northwest Territories have a special relationship with Albertans. We regularly travel, trade, and play and work in Alberta. Edmonton is our city for medical services, post-secondary education, all manner of supplies and services. The NWT and Alberta share an ecosystem with the Northern Alberta included in the Mackenzie River watershed. Northerners, including my parents, came from Alberta. I salute the Premier-elect and her Notley crew for running a marvelous campaign full of trust and change. Northerners will look forward to working with this new, exciting government. I'm sure she will continue the productive relationship between Alberta and the NWT.
The Honourable Member for Etobicoke Lakeshore.
Mr. Speaker, our government created the family tax cut and universal child care benefit to ensure that every Canadian family with children will have money in their pockets.
Great news.
Canadian families, including those in my riding of Etobicoke Lakeshore, are further ahead because of our universal child care benefit. Now the Liberals want to take that away. Mr. Speaker, instead of a family tax cut, the leader of the Liberal Party wants to introduce a family tax hike. He wants high taxes and huge government debt. Mr. Speaker, this does not help the middle class. Only our Conservative government, Mr. Speaker, has a plan that will help middle-class Canadians keep money in their pockets. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Sydney, Victoria.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to honour two residents of Victoria County who have been recently recognized on the international scene, Dr. Ron Stewart and Leon Dubinsky. Dr. Ron Stewart from my hometown was recently awarded the James O. Page Journal of Emergency Medical Services Award and is the first physician outside the United States to receive that award. This award recognizes individuals who exhibit drive and tenacious effort to develop improved emergency medical service systems. And our good family friend, Leon Dubinsky, has also been recognized. A Holocaust Memorial Observance held in Sydney paid tribute to Leon's song, We Rise Again, which he composed in 1985. Dubinsky was presented with the March of the Living Canada Award. Year after year, Leon's song is sung by Canadian participants of the March of the Living, a program that brings students together from all over the world to Poland to study the history of the Holocaust. Uncle Newman, you would be proud. I ask all my colleagues to join me in congratulating Leon Dubinsky and Dr. Ron Stewart on their worldly accomplishments.
The Honourable Member for York Centre.
Speaker, the Liberal leader's high tax plan for the middle class just doesn't make any sense. The Liberal leader admits that there is $2 billion hole.
Wow, $2 billion.
He also admitted that he will have to raise taxes on people earning less than $60,000 a year by canceling their expanded tax-free savings accounts.
That's right.
Economists also say that his proposed tax increases will not raise the money necessary to fund his expensive schemes.
Also true.
His numbers just don't add up. The only way to make the numbers work will be higher taxes on the middle class by taking away the tax-free savings accounts entirely and income splitting for seniors. Canadians know on this side of the House, we will protect the middle class incomes while the Liberals will tax middle class incomes.
The Honourable Member for Chambly-Bordua. Mr. Speaker, 4 years ago I had the privilege of being entrusted by the people of Chambly to represent them. 58 other colleagues from Quebec were given the same privilege. Together with my colleagues from the rest of Canada, we formed the official opposition. It was called the Orange Crush. The Orange Crush is a state of mind, a thirst for change Canadians are expressing, a desire to see politics done differently. to elect people they can relate to, who talk about the issues that affect them. This week, my friends, it was Alberta's turn to succumb to the Orange Crush. Alberta's newly elected NDP MLAs will, like us, bring much-needed new blood to the political debate. My friends, the winds of change are upon us. In October, people all across the country will have their chance to get on board and elect an NDP government.
Mr. Speaker, our government is cutting taxes for hard-working, middle-class Canadians with our family tax cut and the universal child care benefit. Our low-tax plan for families in Selkirk Interlake is working, and we're making sure 100% of families with kids benefit with almost $2,000 back in their pockets for each child that's in preschool and $720 per child from ages of 6 to 17. The Liberal leader confirmed that he'll take this all away and introduce a family tax hike. We know this because there's a $2 billion hole in his plan, and the only way he can find that money is to raise taxes on Canadians. The Liberal leader will need to cancel income splitting for seniors and take away the tax-free savings account entirely. Mr. Speaker, Canadians can trust our government to ensure that never happens. And, Mr. Speaker, the Liberal leader needs to get his head out of his deficit hole.
Oral questions. Questions orales. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, another shocking revelation in the Senate scandal today. According to an RCMP court document made public, the Prime Minister's office played a, quote, key role in altering and falsifying the 2013 audit of Mike Duffy's expenses. Oh. Will the Prime Minister confirm that his office intervened directly to change and falsify the findings of the audit into the expenses of Conservative Senator Mike Duffy?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, Mr. Speaker, questions with respect to Senate audit are best addressed by the Senate. As you know, Mr. Speaker, of course, we've been providing and will continue to provide assistance to the Crown in its case against Mr. Duffy, Mr. Speaker. And, of course, as you know, this matter is before the court, so it would be inappropriate to comment any further. Thank you.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, let me quote the RCMP corporal who conducted the investigation. We've learned that the Prime Minister's office has had a lot of communication with the diverse senators who were involved in these committees and subcommittees. Does the Prime Minister deny that officials in his office secretly discussed the Deloitte audit with Conservative senators before it was completed on May 7th, 2013?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, I just answered that question. Again, questions with respect to a Senate audit are best addressed by the Senate, Mr. Speaker. But as we've been doing right from the beginning, we'll continue to provide the assistance to the Crown in its case against Mr. Duffy, Mr. Speaker. Now, the Leader of the Opposition could certainly provide assistance to the taxpayers of Canada if he would encourage the 68 members of his caucus who owe over $2 million to the Canadian taxpayers. If he would encourage them to pay that back, that would be wonderful, Mr. Speaker. And he could start by showing leadership by reimbursing the Canadian taxpayers the $400,000 that he owes them in illegal funding for an office that was illegal in
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, the RCMP is clear. They have stated before the courts that the report made its way to the Prime Minister's office, and I quote again, it made its way there so they could alter it and make revisions to it. Can the Prime Minister tell us why his office altered the details of this audit? What are they trying to hide? And who are they trying to protect? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I already answered that question. This matter is before the courts, so it would be inappropriate to comment further, but there are other questions, Mr. Speaker. For example, the member for Chicoutimi-Le Fjord, why did he use resources intended for his riding to support an illegal office in Montreal. That member, I hope, will do the right thing, repay the citizens of his riding $30,000.
And refund the $30,000 he owes them.
Exactly.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
2013, Nigel Wright, the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff, wrote in an email to his colleagues in the Prime Minister's office, quote, Mike is very pleased with this, so it will give us a little bit of time if Conservative Senator Tkachuk can pull it off. End quote. Pull what off? Obviously, rewriting the report. They know it as well as we do. This is pure Richard Nixon. The Duffygate cover-up was orchestrated right in the Prime Minister's office. That's what these RCMP court documents prove. Why won't the Prime Minister answer?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. I've already answered that question. Look, what's also before us right now is the fact that there's some 68 members of the NDP caucus who owe over $2.7 million to the Canadian taxpayer, plus interest, Mr. Speaker, for illegal offices in Montreal. Mr. Speaker, there's also another 23 members of the NDP caucus who illegally spent over $1 million in inappropriate mailings, Mr. Speaker. This is the party that accepted illegally $350,000 worth of union donations, that in contravention to the rules of this chamber has a union member working in the Leader of the Opposition's office doing partisan work. He ought to repay the money that he owes taxpayers.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, the email from the Prime Minister's Chief of Staff went on to say that the, quote, purpose of this is to put Mike in a different bucket and to prevent him from going squirrely in a bunch of weekend panel shows. Will the Prime Minister now finally acknowledge that his office has been directly implicated in a deliberate attempt at obstruction of justice?
Hear, hear.
Speaker, what an absolutely ridiculous question from the Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what the reality is here, this is in front of the courts, and we'll let the courts do their work, Mr. Speaker. At the same time, the NDP could show some leadership by reimbursing the Canadian taxpayer the millions of dollars which they owe them, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite, the Leader of the Opposition, owes over $400,000 to the taxpayers of Canada, and 67 other of his members owe the rest. I suggest they pay back the $2.7 million you owe them.
Hear, hear.
Or the Honourable Member for Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, the RCMP revealed that the Prime Minister's office intervened in the audit of Mike Duffy's expenses in order to cover up for him. Even though the PMO circumvented the rules to alter the Duffy report, the Prime Minister never informed the Senate auditor of that fact. Was the Prime Minister one of the people who was not authorized to be informed of the content of the audit? Why did his office intervene in this audit? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
This is before the courts, so we'll allow the courts to do their job on this, Mr. Speaker. At the same time, I was wondering if the Liberals could help us in finding that $40 million that they owe the Canadian taxpayers, Mr. Speaker. I wonder if while they were sitting around the $2 million home of the Leader of the Liberal Party's kitchen table trying to figure out how to relieve Canadians of their hard-earned tax dollars, if they might have thought that a way of helping the middle class would be by finding the $40 million that they stole from them, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps they could start by doing that.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Minister of Justice outrageously referred to Alberta as Albertistan. But it's his government that's being accused of Soviet-style tactics. We now know that the PMO staff secretly tampered with a confidential Senate audit to get their comrade Mike Duffy out of trouble. Did the breach of confidentiality include a briefing for the Prime Minister?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Mr. Speaker, I've answered that question on a number of occasions. And as you know, the case is in front of the courts, so allow the courts to do their work, Mr. Speaker. But again, I would ask the Liberals to help us out and help all Canadians out by helping us find that $40 million that they stole from Canadians, Mr. Speaker. At the same time, as you know, Mr. Speaker, this side of the House, we're doing our best to ensure that our economy continues to grow, that the real Canadian taxpayers have money in their pockets so that they can reinvest in their future and in their family's future, Mr. Speaker, and we'll continue doing that for a long time to come.
Hear, hear. The honourable member for Charlottetown.
Mr. Speaker, we know that Niger Whitehead, Conservative Senator Irving Gerstein called Deloitte to tamper with the Duffy audit. As Bob Rae put it, the Prime Minister would have us believe that he was like the piano player in the brothel, completely oblivious to what was going on upstairs. And we all know how the Prime Minister likes to play the piano. Will the Prime Minister now admit that he ordered his staff to tamper with the Duffy audit?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, this is hardly a time to be reminding the people of Ontario about Bob Rae. Okay, Mr. Speaker? Because Ontarians remember what Bob Rae did to our economy, Mr. Speaker. They remember the billions of dollars in deficits, the high taxes, the thousands, the millions of people who are unemployed, Mr. Speaker. They remember the Rae days. They don't want to go back to that. They're going to do everything to make sure that they don't. Instead, they have a government on this side of the House which is focusing on the economy, which is putting more money in their pockets so they can invest in their future, their families' future, Mr. Speaker, and will continue to do that for a long time to come because it's the right thing for Canada and for Canadians.
The honourable member for Quebec. On this side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we focus on government matters, and the Prime Minister's office seemed much more interested in Senate business than it did in government business. Corporal Gillette revealed that the Prime Minister's office communicated frequently with the diverse senators who were involved in the Senate committees, which coincidentally were discussing the content of the Deloitte audit concerning 3 senators' expenses. Can the Prime Minister explain to us why his office was so interested in the Deloitte audit? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Speaker, I've answered that question, but imagine this member of Parliament getting up and asking a question about accountability, Mr. Speaker. This is a member of Parliament who's given resources by the taxpayers to use for her riding, and this member instead used it in an illegal office in Montreal. Now, this member owes the taxpayers $30,000. $30,000. $30,000. That doesn't include interest, which is compounding every single day. I would encourage her, for her residence and for her riding, to pay it back.
The honourable member for Quebec. Mr. Speaker, when someone doesn't answer the question, apparently they have something to hide. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister's office received the Deloitte report on wrongful expense claims, according to Mr. O'Brien. But this report was confidential, and that means it is intended only for a few people who, in the Prime Minister's office, had access to the report before it was officially tabled before the Senate committee. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have already answered that question. This matter is before the court, and it would be inappropriate to comment further. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, unfortunately for this member, she used close to $30,000 destined for her riding for an illegal office in Montreal. And I certainly hope that she is going to do the right thing and repay the taxpayers in her riding immediately, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Timmins, James Day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, let's review what we know. According to the RCMP, the Office of the Prime Minister of Canada was involved in a scheme to manipulate the findings of an audit report regarding potentially fraudulent claims of a Conservative senator. And yet the Conservatives continue to dodge and weave, stubbornly refusing to answer any questions about the involvement of the Prime Minister's key advisors or what the Prime Minister knew. Will the Prime Minister at least confirm that in order to be able to keep using Mike Duffy as his key fundraiser, his staff orchestrated a cover-up?
Obviously, Mr. Speaker, I completely reject the member opposite's question, and I've answered the question, Mr. Speaker. But let's bear in mind who's asking the question, Mr. Speaker. This is a member who was singled out by the judges who were reviewing our boundaries as somebody who was trying to influence inappropriately the process, Mr. Speaker. He was one of 2 members in this entire House who was singled out. The only other person singled out was another member of the NDP for breaking the rules. So when it comes to ethics, this is certainly not a member that anybody in this House should ever take a lesson from, Mr. Speaker. No one. He could help, though, by repaying the $2.7.
The Honourable Member for Timmins, James May.
What a pitiful legacy for that member. When we're dealing with the allegations of corruption tied to the Prime Minister of the country. Pitiful evasions. The police have the emails from the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister of this country outlining a strategy to manipulate a Senate report and to cover up a case of potential fraud. And the RCMP say that then they contacted the key senators to pull off this scheme. And then the Chief of Staff wrote the $90,000 to make it go away. When will this Prime Minister finally come clean about his involvement in the cover-up and the involvement of his key advisors?
Again, Mr. Speaker, I've answered that question on a number of occasions. But again, when it comes to ethics, let me quote from the judges who were reviewing our boundaries. The first hint of what the Commission considers to be inappropriate involvement by a member of Parliament in the electoral redistribution process, Mr. Speaker. This member has the nerve to get up in this House and ask questions about ethics when he was doing one of the worst things any member of Parliament can do. Try to influence judges reviewing our boundaries in his favor, Mr. Speaker. Now, he was probably worried because he voted against the gun registry, the abolition of the gun registry, which he promised his constituents he wouldn't. So that's why he was trying to gerrymander his riding.
The Honourable Member for Halifax.
So much scandal, so few answers, so much evasion. Mr. Speaker, we can't keep up. So let's try the Minister of Democratic Reform about the integrity of our electoral laws. Former Conservative Minister Peter Panashaway's official agent has been charged with violating the Canada Elections Act. Will the Minister of Democratic Reform please tell the House if he will be introducing amendments to the Elections Act to crack down on Conservatives who break our electoral laws and who knowingly provide the Chief Electoral Officer with false information?
Mr. Speaker, that's obviously an affair between Elections Canada and Mr. Bowers, and will allow the process to unfold, Mr. Speaker. But there are very clear rules that the NDP themselves broke, Mr. Speaker. We bring in the rules, they actually break the rules. This is the party that accepted illegally $350,000 worth of union donations against the rules. This is a party where 68 members owe $2.7 million. Another 23 members owe over $1 million, Mr. Speaker. This is a party convicted of robocalls, Mr. Speaker. Our Minister of Democratic Reform has brought in new rules which will continue to make elections fair. They'll continue to break the rules.
Order. I'll ask members to come to order while the member is answering the question. The Honourable Member for Newton North Delta.
Under this government, young Canadians are struggling. Too many of them unable to get their first break and find a decent job. But instead of helping them, the Conservatives are breaking promises. Instead of spending money on youth employment programs that could get young people their first opportunity, they left $30 million unspent. They certainly enjoy the photo ops and then do not deliver. This is betrayal of our young people. Why are the Conservatives padding their bottom line with broken promises to young people?
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to confirm to the House that our department has come in under budget. We have the NDP has judges success by how much taxpayer money they can shovel blindly out the door. Mr. Speaker, we judge success by the number of young people we can help employ. The Canada Apprentice Grant, for one example, we gave out 500,000 Canada Apprentice grants, including to Nina Whitmer, who was able to graduate debt-free, win the national skills competition, open her own masonry business. Mr. Speaker, we're proud of Nina, and we're proud of the hundreds of thousands of other young people we've helped get apprenticeships.
The Honourable Member for Newton North Delta.
There's a pattern here with the Conservatives. From veterans to the unemployed, They make big promises and then they break them. The Conservatives committed funds to help immigrants get their credentials recognized, to help Canadians living with disabilities find the right opportunity for employment, to help adults struggling with literacy and a lack of basic skills. They made these photo op commitments and then they didn't spend the money. Why do Conservatives continually abandon the most vulnerable Canadians?
Speaker, the member mentions the issue of foreign credentials recognition. We acknowledge that there are many newcomers here who come with skills and professions and trades that they don't get recognized. That's why we partnered with the private sector to issue foreign credential recognition loans, partly funded by the private sector, that help these newcomers get trained, tested, and licensed to work in their field. I'm happy to report that the results are of an over 40% increase in employment among those who participated and less than a 3% default rate on those loans. That is results for newcomers, and we're going to continue to deliver those results.
Honourable member for St. Lambert. Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives' promises are worth no more than their empty policies. The unemployment rate of young people is twice the national average, and all they want is be able to find a first job. Instead of helping them, the Conservatives sent back $100 million to the Treasury that was intended for these young people who are desperately looking for their first job. Why are they abandoning young people when they need our help so desperately? The Honourable Minister of Employment. Mr. Speaker, the NDP and the Liberals judge their success by the amount of taxpayers' money they can spend recklessly, Mr. Speaker. We judge our success by the results achieved by the young people we help.
The quote from Nina Whitmer, who said, and I quote here, "I was able to go through school because of all the grants without any debt. It was amazing, Mr. Speaker." She's now started her own stonemasonry business. She's debt-free, and along with hundreds of thousands of other young apprentices, she is making her way in this country.
The Honourable Member for St. Lambert. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative success means that 15% of the young people are unemployed in Canada today. That's bad. The Parliament approved $100 million to help Canadians find a job. Immigrants who need help to get their credentials recognized. Canadians living with disabilities. People who are trying to find their first job. Adults who want to learn to read and write. These millions of dollars would have made a difference in their lives, but the Conservatives preferred to send that money back to the Treasury. Why are the Conservatives abandoning all these Canadians? Honourable Minister. Mr. Speaker, we judge our success by the results achieved by our young people. For example, we gave the Canada Apprenticeship Grant. Some 500,000 of these grants were awarded, and these grants help young people get the skills they need to practice in specialized trades that are in demand. And now, Mr. Speaker, those young people have become workers with skills that will help them throughout their lives and to build our economy. That is how we were able to create 1.2 million new jobs, and we will continue.
Mr. Speaker, the late Jim Flaherty dismissed income splitting for the wealthy as too expensive and fundamentally unfair. Unfair because it provides nothing to a single mom at the poverty line, while it gives $2,000 to families with incomes over $250,000. If you could trade that unfairness for a better plan, one that's being acclaimed as powerful, progressive, fair, transparent, and efficient, one that fights poverty and improves middle-class incomes, why would you not make that trade? Jim Flaherty would have.
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the Liberals admit that they would raise taxes on almost half of families with kids by scrapping income splitting. That's how many benefit from income splitting. Almost half of families with kids. But why should we believe that they wouldn't get rid of income splitting for seniors if they are opposing the principle of income splitting for families? In fact, when asked about that question, the former Liberal leader, current Heritage critic, said of income splitting for seniors, well, it is not our priority. it would be very, very costly. Mr. Speaker, that sounds like the same rhetoric they're using to justify raising taxes on families. Seniors cannot trust the Liberals.
The honourable member for Wascana.
Mr. Speaker, so now the government is taking its financial advice from a guy who once said a payoff to Mike Duffy was an honourable thing to do. A better plan is bolstering Canada's middle class, and you can do that by cutting their tax rate right across the board to save middle-class families billions of dollars. A better plan is one clean, simple, tax-free child benefit, one that's progressive and fair, providing more support to every middle-class family and all those working so hard just to get there. Why is this government so against fundamental fairness?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Well, Mr. Speaker, income splitting does provide fairness. It gives the same treatment if households where one spouse earns more than the others, as it does to a spouse to a household where the two spouses earn the same amount of money. The Liberals are opposed in principle to all forms of income splitting. That's why they voted against pension splitting when it was first brought in. It's why their former Liberal leader openly opposed it and has not retracted that. And now they expect, on the eve of an election, that seniors are going to believe them when they claim that they've changed their mind. Mr. Speaker, seniors are smarter than that. They won't trust the Liberals. They won't be tricked.
Honourable member for Cape Breton-Canso.
Mr. Speaker, the government's clawed back billions, not millions, but billions of dollars that could have helped seniors, persons with disabilities, and students. What they didn't claw back was the $750 million on those self-serving TV ads. You know who's going to be able to watch the TV ads, though? It'll be the 375,000 unemployed young Canadians, because they don't have to get up to go to work the next day, thanks to this government. Another $90 million, including money for a youth employment strategy, gone under this government. What kids want, or what young people want, are jobs, not state propaganda.
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Well, Mr. Speaker, our plan of trade, tax cuts, and training has helped create 1.2 million net new jobs for Canadians of all ages. Now, he mentions advertising. We did advertise about the Canada Apprentice Loan, and already over 6,000 young people have taken out those loans in order to help with the cost of in-classroom study to get their apprenticeship done and their journeyman ticket and go out into high-demand jobs. We've had over 500,000 apprenticeship grants go out in addition to those loans, Mr. Speaker. These are creating jobs in the trades, and that is the future that we're going to create.
The Honourable Member for Nickelbelt.
Mr. Speaker, Francophone communities outside Quebec need Francophone immigrants, but currently only 2% of immigrants outside Quebec speak French. And yet the minimum quota is 4%. The Commissioner of Official Languages has told us that the Conservatives have even cut regional offices and funding for Francophone immigrants. And Francophone minority communities have sounded the alarm. Their future is at stake. Will the Conservatives finally take the future of Francophones in this country seriously? Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister was very clear on the objective of 4% for Francophone immigrants outside of Quebec. Our government has a plan to meet that objective, and we're already seeing results with the Express Entry program. And we will accept the Commissioner's recommendations.
Francophone communities are in dire need of help, and they're sounding the alarm about their future. The Official Language Commissioner is also concerned. It's clear that Conservatives' cut to services that support Francophone immigration outside Quebec could threaten the vitality of these communities. When will the Minister take the future of Francophone communities across the country seriously and give the support that they need?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Mr. Speaker, we've been very clear about our goal of 4% for Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. Our government has a roadmap to get there, and we're already seeing results from Express Entry. We're taking note of the Commissioner's other recommendations, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I might add while I'm up that when we brought in the roadmap for linguistic duality, that indeed helps minority communities across the country. How did this party vote? How did the NDP vote on that member? Against that.
Full member for Churchill.
Mr. Speaker, once again, this government refused to uphold the fundamental rights of Indigenous peoples, as every single member of the Conservative caucus voted against the bill put forward by my colleague, C-641. This important bill would have enshrined the principles of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples into Canadian law. But by rejecting this bill, the government missed another opportunity to engage in genuine partnership with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Why is this government, yet again, refusing to respect the rights of Indigenous peoples in Canada?
Mr. Speaker, this is a baseless and totally false charge of the NDP simply for political grandstanding and political reasons. The fact of the matter is that this government is the one that amended the Human Rights Act in order to ensure that people on reserve have the same rights as all Canadians. They voted against it, Mr. Speaker. In addition, we improved the matrimonial property rights on reserve, and they also voted against it. Stop the grandstanding.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi Bay, James Nunavik, EU.
Parliament last night was not a matter of left against right, but right against wrong.
My bill received significant support from many municipalities and organizations across Canada, and yet the Conservatives, including the Minister of Aboriginal Affairs, chose to ignore this consensus by voting against my bill. How can the Minister justify the fact that once again he's abandoned Aboriginal communities by refusing to uphold their most fundamental rights? Mr. Speaker, it's strange to hear a member rise in the House of Commons and argue that the Canadian Constitution, that the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms does not protect Aboriginal rights in this country. This is complete nonsense. The fact, Mr. Speaker, is that the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples has been endorsed by Canada as an aspirational document that we respect, but subject to Canadian law. Everyone here, if the NDP wants to subject our rights to a right of veto by a particular group, well, that will not hold the road.
For Edmonton Centre.
Mr. Speaker, our government and many people in Edmonton and elsewhere were disappointed to learn earlier today that convicted terrorist Omar Ahmed Khader has been released from prison today onto the streets of Edmonton. The Globe and Mail described this individual as raised to be a terrorist. It was not surprising since his entire family are proudly admitted terrorists. Could the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety update the House on this ongoing situation?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary of the Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for that question. We are in fact disappointed with today's decision and regret that a convicted terrorist has been allowed back into Canadian society without having served his full sentence. Omar Ahmed Khader pleaded guilty to heinous crimes, including the murder of American Army medic Sergeant Christopher Spear, and he has admitted that his ideology has not changed. While the Liberal leader refused to rule out special compensation for this convicted terrorist, and the NDP actively tries to force Canadian taxpayers to compensate him, we believe that the real victims of crime, not the perpetrators, are the ones that deserve compensation.
Well, speaking of victims of crime, Mr. Speaker, sexual assault is a devastating crime and one of the most difficult to prosecute. Survivors deserve to be treated with the utmost respect and dignity. However, the DNA collection kits provided by the RCMP are badly out of date. They often use painful and obsolete techniques, and even worse, they risk DNA evidence degradation. A new kit has been developed, but the RCMP won't say when they'll distribute it. Will the Minister make this a priority? Will the government expedite the distribution of new DNA collection kits to health professionals across Canada? This is a matter of justice.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for that question. As you know, it is on this side of the House, the Conservative government that has continuously supported providing resources to the RCMP and funding. We have actually done it through crime prevention measures to keep communities safe. Of course, any crime that is against any Canadian citizen is a horrific crime, especially those of a sexual nature. And I just want to thank the RCMP for being able to work in this situation to be able to solve these most heinous crimes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Alfred Pellan. For the victims of sexual assault, seeing justice done is crucial. And yet we've learned that the rape kits distributed by the RCMP, and they're out of date, and they're not up to forensic standards. We know that a new kit's in production, but we have no idea when it will be available. Can the minister tell us when this new kit will finally be distributed? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Again, Mr. Speaker, it's on this side of the House that we have continuously funded the RCMP to ensure that they have the resources necessary to keep Canadians safe. In fact, it's this government that raised and invested more funding into the RCMP 7 times since 2006. The opposition party has said no to each of those increases. Budget 2015 actually increases our funding to national security agencies by $300 million. And, Mr. Speaker, most importantly, it's this Conservative government that brought in the Victims' Bill of Rights to stand up and make sure that victims have a voice in the criminal justice system.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. The middle class is decidedly not going to get a break under the Conservatives. The Canadians are soon going to be buried under a whole range of new banking fees. They're going to have to pay a mortgage fee, or pay down student loans, or even pay for their credit cards. Canadians are fed up with pay to pay. Will the minister let the banks pick out of the pockets of Canadians again?
Mr. Speaker, we're the only party that has consistently stood up for the consumers by lowering taxes and putting more money back into their pockets. Unlike the Liberals and the New Democratic Party that would raise taxes on middle-class consumers, our government has reduced taxes for the middle class. Our government has taken action to improve low-cost bank accounts and expand no-cost bank options for more than 7 million Canadians. We introduced the debit and the credit card code of conduct. Shamefully, Mr. Speaker, the opposition parties vote against all these measures that help middle-class consumers.
Honourable Member for Davenport. Let's be clear, Mr. Speaker. First of all, that much vaunted code of conduct is a voluntary code of conduct. Now, the big five banks have all said that in a few weeks, middle-class Canadians will face more pay-to-pay fees, and these are even worse than the ones the NDP forced the government to act upon last year. This is a basic issue of fairness. Now, does the minister really think it's fair that banks charge their customers a fee just to make a mortgage payment, just to make a credit card payment, to make a student loan payment? Where is this minister's backbone? Why is he letting the banks get away with it?
Again, Mr. Speaker, this party, our party, is the only party that has consistently brought forward legislation that would support middle-class consumers. We've lowered taxes for consumers, Mr. Speaker, making Canada the lowest tax regime in the last 50 years right now. Unlike the Liberals and the NDP, they would raise taxes on those same consumers, on the middle-class consumers. They would raise taxes on middle-class seniors. They would raise taxes on middle-class families. Mr. Speaker, that's the reason that when Canadians look, they understand that this Conservative Party is the party that they want to support.
Order. The Honourable Member for Etobicoke North.
Mr. Speaker, a new report from Catalyst paints a disturbing picture for Canadian women. The report found Canadian women doing the same work earn $8,000 less than men. The gap is double the global average of $4,000. This gap has serious consequences for women, their families, and the Canadian economy. Does the Minister for the Status of Women think it's fair that women get paid less for equal work? Why is she doing nothing to close the pay gap?
The Honourable Minister of Labour.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the best way to close the pay gap is to make sure women have great jobs, and that's what this government is focused on. Making sure that Canadian women have access to board opportunities, opportunities, making sure women have access to skilled professional trades, making sure women have access to absolutely great jobs that pay well. We're focused on creating jobs. In fact, we've created 1.2 million jobs since the downturn of the recession. Why do they never support anything we do to make sure women have jobs in this country?
Mr. Speaker, more than 200 Quebec artists have signed a letter written by playwright Michel-Marc Bouchard asking the Prime Minister to personally intervene in the Raif Badawi file. Mr. Badawi's only crime has been to defend freedom of expression, human rights, and gender equality. The Prime Minister boasts about having a foreign policy that's based on principles, but in this case, he remains silent. Will he finally do what we have been asking for months, which is to say, personally intervene in the Badawi file? Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Silently, we regularly and publicly stated Canada's strong objections to the imprisonment and punishment of Raif Badawi, and will do so again today. Canada considers the punishment of this individual to be a violation of human dignity, and we continue to call for clemency in his case. We've made representations to Saudi Arabia's ambassador here in Ottawa and Canada's ambassador in Saudi Arabia. We have also registered our government's concerns with the government of Saudi Arabia, and this will continue going forward until clemency is granted. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honourable Member for Windsor West. The plan to bury radioactive waste in southern Ontario, right next to the Great Lakes, is now in the hands of the Minister of Environment. Communities on both sides of the international border, representing millions of people, have expressed serious concerns with the process. They are worried about the potential impact of radiation and the Great Lakes together, side by side. Mr. Speaker, no other alternatives were even considered, and many people feel they weren't adequately consulted, including municipalities and the U.S. Congress. Will the minister require further study of alternatives and consultation with affected communities of this very serious matter?
The Honourable Minister of Natural Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the member's question. We're committed to a strong, independent environmental assessment process that protects Canada's environment, promotes responsible resource development. The Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission is tasked with ensuring that nuclear projects are safe for Canadians and safe for the environment. We'll review the Joint Review Panel report before making any decisions on this file. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Louis Hébert. Mr. Speaker, if there is a political mirage concerning the Quebec Bridge, it is the Conservatives' appearance of wanting to resolve the problem. After 10 years, they still haven't found a solution, but we in the NDP are proposing an initiative that's been well received by Mayors Labaume and Lehouillier. The mayors and the people of the Quebec region understand that CN will not budge if they're not pushed. Will the minister support our proposal? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary. Mr. Speaker, our government is the only to have put forward tangible steps to repaint the Quebec Bridge. The NDP's proposal really is a political mirage. The people find it fair that our plan to repay the debt is demanding that CN pay their share.
Mr. Speaker, families in my riding of Oakville are very pleased with our government's plan to put more money back in their pockets to be spent on their priorities. This is why we introduced the enhanced universal child care benefit and family tax cut. Can the Minister of Employment please update this House on how we can ensure all Canadian families with children will benefit from our plan?
The Honourable Minister of Employment.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, the family tax cut or income splitting will help almost half of families with kids. We support income splitting because it gives tax fairness to those families. The Liberals oppose the principle of income splitting for families. So logically, they oppose it for seniors. They voted against income splitting for seniors. Their former leader, the current heritage critic, spoke out against pension splitting for seniors. But now, just before an election, they want seniors to believe that they've changed their mind. Mr. Speaker, they have a multi-billion-dollar hole in their plan. We know that they're going to reach into seniors' pockets to fill that hole.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Laurent-Cartierville. Mr. Speaker, the Commissioner's report reminds us that the objective of having 4.4% for Francophone immigrants outside Quebec, set by the Liberals in 2008, has been delayed by the Conservatives until 2023. They've closed regional offices, done away with programs like Francophone Significant Benefit and Destination Canada, given $120 million to other means other than Francophone immigration, and dismantled Francophone immigration. And to fix this mess, the minister promised he would take corrective steps within the express entry system. When will he do so? Will he fulfill his promise for once? The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
We've been very clear about our goal of 4% for Francophone immigration outside of Quebec. Our government has a roadmap to get there, and we're already seeing results from Express Entry. We're taking note of the Commissioner's other recommendations, Mr. Speaker. But, Mr. Speaker, the roadmap for linguistic duality that our government brought in 2008 was renewed again for 5 years in 2013, provides for over $1.1 billion to promote official languages in minority communities. And unfortunately, the Liberals say one thing when they stand up to ask questions in this House, Mr. Speaker, but they vote differently when programs like that come.
Honourable Member for Laurier-Sainte-Marie. Mr. Speaker, 3 vigils are being held today and tomorrow to mark the anniversary of the conviction of Raif Badawi. It's been a year since Mr. Badawi was sentenced to 1,000 lashes for having kept a blog on social issues. More than 200 public figures from Quebec are asking the Prime Minister to redouble his efforts, his diplomatic efforts, so that Mr. Badawi might finally rejoin his family and children in Sherbrooke. We've heard enough excuses and pretexts. Is the Prime Minister prepared to personally request Raif Badawi's release? Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
We have registered our government's concerns with the government of Saudi Arabia. We do this on a regular basis, and we'll continue to go that going forward until clemency is granted. Mr. Speaker, we maintain an ongoing dialogue with Saudi Arabia on a number of issues, including all aspects of human rights, and we will continue to do so.
The honourable member for Elmwood-Transcona.
Speaker, our Prime Minister understands that small businesses are the backbone of the Canadian economy.
Sure does.
Small businesses in my riding of Elmwood-Transcona know that the Conservative Party is the only party in this House that supports them. For instance, we introduced the Small Business Job Credit, lowering EI premiums for over 700,000 small businesses across Canada to help them create jobs. Can the Minister of State for Finance please tell the House what new steps the government is taking to stand up for small businesses?
Hear,
hear. Minister of State.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member from Elmwood-Transcona for the question. Our government is proud to be cutting the small business tax rate to 9%. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business applauds this measure and gave the budget an A. For a small business with a taxable income of $500,000, this tax cut and all the tax relief that our government has brought forward will result in a decrease in federal tax of nearly 50%. That's 50% that business can then reinvest in creating jobs back into their own business. But the Liberal leader has said that if given the chance, he would kill jobs by reversing our small business tax rate.
The Honourable Member for Montcalm. Mr. Speaker, today is the sad anniversary of the conviction in Saudi Arabia of Mr. Raif Badawi. The only reason for his imprisonment is that he has opinions. He has been sentenced to 1,000 lashes, an inhumane, archaic and savage sentence. By remaining silent, Canada is complicit in denying free speech and opinions. Will the government stop being preoccupied and honour Canadians by making diplomatic representations in order to free Mr. Badawi? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
We certainly haven't been silent on this. We've regularly and publicly stated Canada's strong objections to the imprisonment and punishment of Mr. Badawi, and we're doing so again today, Mr. Speaker. We consider the punishment of this man to be a violation of human dignity, and we continue to call for clemency in this case.
Honourable Member for Montfort. Mr. Speaker, in March, Ms. Maud Barlow, a former UN advisor, spoke out against the current government for having sacrificed our potable water with the goal of promoting its goal of making this country an energy powerhouse. Canada has the responsibility of preserving our water as a resource that is essential to our survival and to biodiversity. Did the government review its legislation to ensure that our fresh water is protected from the adverse effects of the oil industry?
Honourable Minister of International Trade.
Well, Mr. Speaker, nothing could be further from the truth. I remember back in 1988, those same individuals, the same party, was claiming that we were going to be sacrificing our sovereignty over fresh water. In fact, none of that happened. Today, we're stronger as a country. Our economy is stronger. We have trade agreements with 43 different countries around the world. As we promote Canada's trade interest, we're focused on promoting the interests of our exporters, the interests of our investors, the interests of our consumers. Mr. Speaker, we're very proud of our record on trade.
That concludes question period for today.
Go to the Thursday question, and the Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. This has been a good week for Canadians in Alberta, as Albertans chose a strong, stable majority NDP government under the leadership of Premier-elect Rachel Notley. Wonderful news, Mr. Speaker, for all Canadians. Now, NDP MLAs throughout Alberta will be getting right to work to serve Albertans, as NDP MPs serve Canadians right across the country. Now, Mr. Speaker, I actually knocked on doors in Alberta. And in southern Alberta, as I spoke with Albertans, they were as concerned with the federal Conservative agenda as they were with the provincial Conservative agenda. So my question for Thursday is simply to my honourable colleague, are they hearing those voices, those concerns raised in Alberta and right across Canada about this government's mean-spirited agenda, its emphasis on always helping the wealthiest of Canadians while cutting services to the middle class? And, Mr. Speaker, if you'll permit me, I'll also ask my colleague for the Thursday question if the government is going to support the NDP's legislation tomorrow to remove the GST on feminine hygiene products. That's long overdue, Mr. Speaker, and many, many millions of Canadian families are